Thaddeus Monroe wiped the sweat from his brow as he entered the county auction house. His weathered hands clutched exactly $217, every penny he had managed to save over 3 years of drought and hardship. The family farm was barely surviving, and without a horse to replace old Samson who had passed last winter, the coming harvest seemed impossible to manage. The auction barn smelled of hay, manure, and desperation. Thaddeus recognized that scent well. It had been clinging to his own clothes for months now. He took a seat on a splintered bench in the back row, hoping to remain inconspicuous among the wealthier farmers and livestock dealers who regularly attended these events. "Next lot, number 43, the auctioneer called out, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. A 5-year-old thoroughbred mare, no papers, some scarring on the hindquarters. The horse that emerged seemed out of place. Despite the mentioned scarring, she had an elegant bearing that didn't match the auctioneer's dismissive introduction. Her coat was a rich chestnut with unusual white markings that resembled scattered stars. When she tossed her head, something about her movement captivated Thaddeus. He sat up straighter, inexplicably drawn to this animal. "Starting bid at 100, the auctioneer announced, his tone suggesting he didn't expect much interest. Nobody raised their paddles. The wealthy buyers were waiting for the documented thoroughbreds coming later in the auction. The dealers saw the scars and passed judgment. 75 then, the auctioneer lowered, sounding impatient. Still nothing. $50, folks. That's practically giving her away." Thaddeus found his hand rising almost of its own accord. 50, he called out, his voice cracking from disuse. The auctioneer pointed at him, barely concealing his surprise. 52. "The gentleman in the back. Do I hear 60? The barn remained silent except for the nervous shuffling of the mare's hooves on the wooden platform. "Going once, going twice, I'm sold. To the gentleman in the back for $50. Thaddeus could hardly believe his luck. As he approached to claim his purchase and complete the paperwork, the mare's deep brown eyes seemed to study him with unexpected intelligence. He extended his hand slowly and she nuzzled against his palm without hesitation. "What's her name?" Thaddeus asked the handler. "Doesn't have one that we know of," the man replied disinterestedly. "She was part of a lot we got from an estate sale, back east, no history provided." As Thaddeus led her out of the auction house, he whispered, "I'll call you Serendipity, Sarah for short." The name felt right, a lucky find on a day when luck was in short supply. Loading her into his battered trailer, Thaddeus couldn't shake the feeling that there was something extraordinary about this horse. Little did he know, several pairs of eyes watched this transaction with intense interest from a luxury sedan parked across the street. Eyes that recognized exactly what he had just unwittingly purchased for a mere $50. The first week with Sarah transformed Thaddeus's struggling farm. The mare worked tirelessly, displaying a strength and endurance that belied her elegant appearance. She seemed to understand commands before he even issued them, moving with precision through the fields as if she'd worked them her entire life. Thaddeus's 10-year-old daughter, Willa, formed an immediate bond with the horse. The normally quiet, bookish child blossomed in Sarah's presence, spending hours brushing the mare's coat and talking to her as if sharing secrets with an old friend. For the first time since her mother's passing 3 years ago, Willa's laughter echoed across the farm. "She's magic, Pa," Willa declared one evening as they sat on the porch watching Sarah graze in the twilight. "Not regular magic, but the kind that makes everything better just by being there." Thaddeus smiled, grateful for his daughter's happiness even as he silently calculated how they would manage the upcoming mortgage payment. The horse was indeed a blessing, but their financial situation remained precarious. On the 10th day, a sleek black SUV crawled up the dusty driveway. Thaddeus watched warily as a man in an expensive suit emerged, looking comically out of place against the backdrop of the weathered farmhouse. The stranger's shoes, likely worth more than Thaddeus earned in a month, accumulated dust as he approached. "Mr. Monroe?" The man's accent suggested East Coast education and old money. "My name is Bartholomew Westfield. I represent Halcyon Stables." Thaddeus had heard of Halcyon. Everyone in the horse world had. They produced champion racehorses with bloodlines as carefully curated as royal families. "What brings Halcyon all the way out here?" Thaddeus asked, not bothering to hide his suspicion. "I believe you recently acquired a chestnut mare at the county auction," Westfield stated rather than asked. "I'd like to discuss purchasing her." Before Thaddeus could respond, the man continued, "I'm prepared to offer you $20,000. Cash, today." The amount struck Thaddeus like a physical blow. $20,000 would clear his debts, with enough left over to repair the irrigation system and perhaps even put something aside for Willa's education. "Why?" Thaddeus managed to ask. "Let's just say the horse was sold by mistake," Westfield replied smoothly. "A clerical error. She belongs with Halcyon." Thaddeus frowned. "She doesn't have papers." A regrettable oversight that we're eager to correct. Westfield's smile didn't reach his eyes. $25,000. Final offer. From the corner of his eye, Thaddeus saw Willa watching from the barn entrance, her expression anxious. Sarah stood beside her, both of them unnaturally still, as if waiting for his decision. "She's not for sale," Thaddeus heard himself say. "I appreciate your interest, but we need her here." Westfield's cordial mask slipped momentarily. "Mr. Monroe, you clearly don't understand what you have or what I'm offering. That horse is worth—" "I know exactly what she's worth to us," Thaddeus interrupted, standing straighter. "And it's not measured in dollars." As the SUV disappeared down the driveway, kicking up an angry cloud of dust, Thaddeus wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, or somehow, impossibly, the wisest decision. The curious visits didn't end with Bartholomew Westfield. Over the next 2 weeks, various representatives arrived at the Monroe farm, each offering increasingly substantial sums for Sarah. A woman from Blue Blood Breeding Consortium offered $50,000. A delegate from Dubai's Royal Stables proposed $100,000 and threw in an already trained replacement horse. With each refusal, Thaddeus's reputation spread through the county. Locals began driving by slowly, hoping to glimpse the mysterious mare that commanded such attention. Some offered unsolicited advice, insisting he was foolish to reject life-changing money for just a horse. But Thaddeus noticed something others didn't. Sarah was transforming their land. The fields where she grazed grew lusher. The vegetables in Willa's garden doubled in size. Even the ancient apple tree, barren for years, suddenly bore fruit. When he worked the fields with Sarah, they accomplished in hours what used to take days. One evening, while brushing Sarah in the barn, Thaddeus discovered a small scar hidden beneath her mane, a mark in the shape of a crescent moon. That night, he stayed up researching and found a single reference in an old horse breeding journal. The Moonshadow bloodline, distinguished by its crescent mark, was thought extinct after the mysterious disappearance of the last mare in 2010. Next morning, a convoy of vehicles appeared, 3 black SUVs flanking a stretched limousine. From the limousine emerged Vincenzo Rossi, founder of Rossi Racing, whose horses had won the Kentucky Derby 3 times in the past decade. "Mr. Monroe," Rossi greeted him without preamble. $1 million for the mare," Willa gasped from the porch where she'd been reading. $1 million, Rossi repeated. "And I'll establish a college fund for your daughter. Another $500,000 in that fund." Thaddeus felt lightheaded. With that money, he could secure Willa's future, buy neighboring land, rebuild everything. "May I at least see her?" Rossi asked when Thaddeus remained silent. Thaddeus nodded reluctantly, leading the way to the pasture where Sarah grazed. As they approached, the horse raised her head, eyes fixing on Rossi with unnerving intensity. "Magnificent," Rossi whispered. "She's the last Moonshadow mare. We thought they were gone forever." "What makes this bloodline so special?" Thaddeus asked. "Every Moonshadow horse ever raced won," Rossi said simply. "Not just one. Dominated. But more than that, they're said to bring prosperity to their caretakers. The land flourishes, crops thrive, finances improve. Some call it superstition, but—" He gestured at the vibrant fields surrounding them, so different from the struggling farm of just weeks ago. $2 million, Rossi declared. "Final offer." That night, Thaddeus sat with Willa on the porch steps, explaining Rossi's offer and what it could mean for them. "We could move somewhere nice," he concluded. "You could go to any college you want someday." Willa looked toward the pasture where Sarah's form was visible in the moonlight. "But what would happen to her?" "She'd race, live in the finest stables. She wouldn't be free, though," Willa said softly. "And we wouldn't be us anymore." Thaddeus realized his daughter had articulated exactly what had been troubling him. They wouldn't be the Monroes of Monroe Farm. They'd be the family who sold a horse for millions. The morning after Rossi's visit, Thaddeus awoke to find Sarah missing. The gate to her pasture stood open, though he distinctly remembered securing it the night before. Cold panic seized him as he rushed through the property, calling her name. He found her 3 fields over, standing beside a section of earth near the creek that cut through their property. As he approached, she pawed insistently at the ground, then looked at him expectantly. "What is it, girl?" he asked, kneeling to examine the spot. The soil felt different here, damper than it should be despite the recent dry spell. Acting on instinct, Thaddeus fetched a shovel and began to dig. 3 feet down, water began pooling in the hole. By afternoon, he had uncovered a spring, a clean, clear source of water that had been hidden beneath their land all along. News of the discovery spread quickly. The county geological surveyor confirmed it was part of an aquifer that ran directly beneath the Monroe farm. With proper equipment, Thaddeus could irrigate his entire property without relying on the increasingly unreliable rain or expensive county water. That same week, Willa found unusual seeds sprouting in the garden, plants none of them had sown. The local agricultural extension agent identified them as an heirloom variety of wheat thought to be extinct, one particularly resistant to drought and disease. "Your property sits on what was once native grassland," the agent explained. "These seeds must have been dormant in the soil for decades, perhaps disturbed recently by your horse's movements or changes in the water table from the spring." By month's end, 3 more parties had arrived with offers for Sarah. A consortium of European breeders proposed $3 million. A Chinese billionaire raised the stakes to 5. An anonymous buyer communicated through layers of lawyers, offering $7 million and a lifetime position for Thaddeus, managing a horse farm in Kentucky. Each time, the decision became more excruciating. The money could change not just their lives, but the lives of generations of Monroes to come. Yet something held Thaddeus back, something beyond emotional attachment. He began documenting the changes on their land, soil samples showing unprecedented mineral richness, photographs of wildlife returning to areas that had been barren for years, measurements of crop yields that defied agricultural norms. "It's like, she's healing the land," Willa observed one evening as they watched a family of deer drink confidently from the newly flowing creek, wildlife that hadn't been seen in these parts for years. When the full moon rose that night, Thaddeus noticed Sarah standing motionless in her pasture, the crescent mark on her neck seeming to glow with an internal light. He watched in amazement as she pawed the ground 3 times, then raised her head to the moon and remained perfectly still until dawn. The next morning, the spot she had marked sprouted tiny blue flowers, a species the internet identified as moonshadow lupine, believed extinct for over a century. As Thaddeus photographed the flowers, a black Tesla pulled up his driveway. A young woman emerged, dressed simply but in clothes that whispered of wealth rather than shouting it. "Mr. Monroe," she said, extending her hand. "My name is Lorelei Blackwood. I believe you have something that belongs to my family." Lorelei Blackwood didn't offer money. Instead, she asked for something Thaddeus hadn't expected: time. Time to explain, time to share a story, time to reveal the truth about Sarah. They sat at the worn kitchen table as Lorelei produced a leather-bound journal and a collection of photographs spanning nearly 2 centuries. The earliest showed a horse, remarkably similar to Sarah, standing beside a woman in 19th century clothing, a woman with the same unusual eyes as Lorelei. "The Moonshadow bloodline began with my great-great-grandmother's mare, Star Dancer," Lorelei explained. "They're not just horses, Mr. Monroe, they're guardians. According to Blackwood family lore, Moon shadow horses possessed the ability to restore balance to land that had fallen out of harmony. They could find hidden water, revive dormant seeds, and bring prosperity, but only when paired with caretakers who valued the land above profit. For generations, my family protected them, breeding them carefully and placing them with worthy stewards, Lorelei continued. But my father broke tradition. Drowning in gambling debts, he secretly sold our last mare, Sarah's mother, to Halcyon Stables. Halcyon had wanted to commercialize the bloodline, to create racehorses without the moonshadow sensitivity. Their breeding experiments failed, but produced one foal, Sarah, before her mother died. When Sarah showed the telltale crescent mark and the same resistant temperament as her ancestors, Halcyon deemed her worthless and sold her at auction. By the time I tracked her here, Lorelei said, something extraordinary had already happened. She chose you, Mr. Monroe. I don't understand, Thaddeus replied. She was just the only horse I could afford. Lorelei smiled. Moonshadow horses aren't chosen. They choose. They recognize souls who love the land for itself, not for what can be extracted from it. She pointed to the photographs she had taken, of their property from the road. Look at your farm compared to your neighbors. The boundary lines are visible from the air. Your land is healing while theirs remains stressed. This is Sarah's gift. So you've come to reclaim her, Thaddeus said heavily, his heart sinking. No, Lorelei surprised him. I've come to offer a partnership. The Blackwood Trust owns land across the country, land that needs healing. We place Moonshadow Guardians with worthy caretakers and provide the resources they need to restore the balance. Her proposal was simple yet profound. The Monroe farm would become part of the Blackwood Trust. Thaddeus would retain ownership and receive funding to fully restore his property using sustainable methods. In return, he would help raise Sarah's foals and place them with other carefully selected stewards. You turned down millions because something deeper told you Sarah belonged here, Lorelei concluded. That same wisdom is what my ancestors recognized in the Moonshadow horses. The understanding that true value isn't measured in money, but in harmony. As the sun set that evening, Thaddeus and Willa stood with Lorelei in the field of blooming Moonshadow lupines watching Sarah graze peacefully beside them. The mare raised her head, regarding them with those ancient knowing eyes. What do you think, Willa? Thaddeus asked, his arm around his daughter's shoulders. I think this is where we belong, she answered without hesitation. All of us. The next morning, as news crews gathered at the edge of the property, drawn by rumors of the poor farmer who had turned down millions, Thaddeus, Willa, and Lorelei signed the partnership agreement. Above them, Sarah watched from her pasture, the crescent mark on her neck catching the sunlight like a promise. When asked by a persistent reporter why he had refused fortunes for just a horse, Thaddeus smiled and looked across his flourishing fields. Some things can't be bought or sold, he said simply. Some things are meant to remind us of what we already have. In the years that followed, the Monroe Blackwood Restoration Project became famous not for the mysterious horse that started it all, but for pioneering sustainable agriculture methods that spread across the drought-plagued region. Sarah produced 7 foals, each bearing the crescent mark, each choosing their own caretaker when the time came. And on moon-bright nights, locals sometimes reported seeing Thaddeus Monroe riding across his thriving fields on a chestnut mare who moved like flowing water, leaving a trail of blue flowers in her wake.